If you want to make your way up to the front speakers table, there is a copy of the manager's presentation, paper form. Okay, we'll call the special meeting of the Enfield Town Council to order. This is our community conversation on the budget. And Suzanne, if we could have roll call, please. Here.
Here.
Actually, yeah, Councilman Arnone's here.
No, I might have missed it. I was chatting, sorry.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We should have 8 members. Okay, so we have 8 members present. First of all, to the audience, thank you for being here this evening for the community conversation. Just to give you a quick outline of this evening, we will start with a presentation by our town manager, Matt Koppler, on his proposed budget. And then after Matt is done with his presentation, we will have the question and answer portion of the community conversation. If you would like to either ask a question, give commentary, I'll just ask you to please raise your hand. I'll call on you. You'll come up to the front table. The microphone is in the on position already, so just please pick it up and speak into the microphone so everyone can hear you, plus it can be picked up by ETV. There's no time limit on question, and we want this to be that exchange back and forth. So if you have a specific question that you want answered, we'll provide an answer and give an opportunity for follow-up or rebuttal, things such as that. So this is meant to be that session that does allow you to ask questions and get your answers. So with that, Matt, we'll have you do your presentation. Matt Koppler.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out. It's good to see everyone. I'm going to apologize up front. For most of the day, I have not had a voice. So when I lose mine, which I guarantee I probably will here in the next hour, I apologize. So the budget. It's that time of the year again. And kind of quickly go over what the budget process is for the town of Enfield. Our department directors begin the process and prepare what I call an expense plan, you know, what they intend to spend over the next year. Sorry, there's twittering going on here, I see. Then once they submit their plan to me, my staff sits down with each of the departments and goes over what they've submitted at length to find out what the justification and rationale is for the money that they're requesting as part of their budget. I then submit that, which this year was March 17th, to the town council. And going from there, and actually we're right on the edge of this. We start this Saturday, bright and early. Council will be meeting with the department directors on reviewing what was part of the budget that I submitted. And just to let you know what they're looking at here, if I could, this is the document that we submitted to the town council, which shows all the expenditure requests. And if you could see this, it's line item and goes into a lot of detail. We then, at the end of April, and I'll have the dates here in a few seconds, we hold the public hearing on the proposed budget, and that's the residents' opportunity to give their opinion on what should or shouldn't happen with the budget, what they like, what they don't like, and so on. And then right after that, council begins 2 weeks or such of deliberation, and then I believe by the 20th of May this year, they will then finalize a budget that gets adopted and goes into effect July 1st. That's how it's supposed to work. That's how it has always worked. And so these are the dates. Again, November is when the department directors began. We're here, right here, which doesn't show up very well, especially if you're colorblind. That's really bad. But April 30th is when the public hearing, 7 p.m. at Enfield High, and no later than May 20th is when the budget will be adopted. There's always a lot of factors that impact the preparation of the budget. I've tried to keep it to one page this year. Usually it goes for a couple different pages. But it actually was a good pre-budget time for us. The state revenues, we knew. This is the second year of the biannual budget. They let us know in advance there's probably going to be very little change to that, which again is a good thing for us, knowing what the state revenues, because you'll see the impact the state has on our budget here in a few slides. Our employee health insurance costs have been stable. Our pension costs are fairly stable. The grand list was stable. All good things. Bad things, workers' comp, again, we've been notified that those costs are going back up again. And as projected for a number of years now, we've had an increase in the debt service. And again, it's a programmed increase that we experience. And when you go out, it stays the same without any new debt added. It stays the same up until 2017 when it drops back down considerably. So where our money comes from. The primary source of revenue for the town of Enfield are property taxes, personal property taxes, and vehicle taxes. That makes up 69% of the overall revenue stream. Intergovernmental, and again, the primary source is the state revenues, make up 27%. Those two numbers have been fairly stable since I've been here, where I think the intergovernmental has been as high as 30%, and I think the taxes have been low as around 65%. But again, they stay in the range that they're at there, not too much difference. The one largest intergovernmental revenue that we receive is the ECS grant, which is the funding for the schools. And down there, because everybody always asks this question, 1 mil this year equals $2.822 million. That will be on a quiz later on. So the budget itself, general fund, is $119,888,064. It's split between the town of Enfield and the Board of Education. You might see that the Board of Education budget is flat funded from the current year. However, the little notation that I have down there, within my budget, the town actually absorbs $683,000 and change of the cost to operate the IT. So that effectively opens up $683,000 for the Board of Education to spend within the budget, within that $64 million and change that they have. Budget breakdown. I tried to make this very simple because, you know, when you look at our budget, we are a service provider. And when you're a service provider, it relies heavily upon human resources. And when you look here, 61% of our costs are tied up in human resources, whether it's in the wages or the benefits. And you know, I think one of the things that we've done a very good job is to maintain a good ratio when it comes to the benefits. And you know, we go back probably 4 years or so when the town decided to go to self-funding with the health insurance. And because of that, where other communities have been seeing 10, 15, 20% increases in those health benefit costs, we've seen a fairly stable rate for the last 4 years. And again, we're proposing some changes in the healthcare plan that will help, you know, prepare us for the future of healthcare, which we have no clue what the future of healthcare is, by the way, but we're trying to prepare ourselves for it. So 39% of everything else is everything else. So that's our operational costs. That's the debt service. That's the supplies that we we pay for. That's the electricity that we pay for. Everything other than personnel benefits and wages makes up only 39% of our budget. And on my computer screen, this looks a lot better than what it does by you, especially at a distance. And I understand that, and I apologize. But as always, this will be put up on our website, so you'll be able to go to it and spend a little bit more time looking at this in closer proximity to your eyes. But overall, again, within the general fund, the largest expenditure, single expenditure, is within the public works. They spend this year, I think, a little over $16 million proposed. The next largest in line is our public safety, and so that's public safety, that's the police department, that's communications, and school security officers. That's approximately 13 million or so in total for those. And then the next one, and that's where this kind of goes a little bit astray, is where I wanted to explain the transfers to other funds, because it makes up a significant portion of the general fund budget, but it really doesn't tell you what it is. And I tried in this secondary pie chart here to show you out of that 14%, it's broken down. The largest part goes to CIP, social services, IT, and then EMS. And so this is money that we transfer from the general fund into those other funds. And I have another slide, which we'll go to right now, that shows those other funds. And what I did last year, and I think it's a very reflective graph to show, is this is the current year's budget, this is the proposed budget, and then this third bar over here column is actually what the general fund contributes or proposes to contribute for the next year's budget. So you kind of understand the magnitude of the general fund funding of these other funds that we have. And you can see that recreation primarily revenue comes in as user fees, but the largest revenue comes from the general fund. Information technology, the revenue comes in from the general fund primarily, from the schools, but also from the fire departments that we partner with as well to provide services. And then social services, again, general fund is a large contributor towards it, but you also have the user fees that come from Child Development Center or the adult daycare, or grants that we receive maybe through the youth services or FRC. And then EMS revenues primarily come from the client fees, which I believe this year were a little over $2 million in projection, and then there's about $700,000 or so coming from the general fund. And in 3 of those 4 up there, they show a slight increase over the current year's budget in the proposed, and you really see a reduction in the information technology budget, and I'll get into that in a little bit. The last large fund that I would like to talk about is the Water Pollution Control Fund. And you might remember last year, or as part of this year's budget last year at this time, we started talking about going away from the ad valorem fee for the Water Pollution Control Fund, and going to a strict user fee funding. And so I wanted to show 2 things that one, in the upcoming budget, 66% of the cost that is in that $6 million is operations. And you break down the operations from what you would expect in terms of electricity and the personnel, some things you might not be aware of. But up until probably 2006-ish, the general fund was supporting above the revenues that were coming in for the WPC. And it came out to about $3 million in total that the town now needs to refund from the sewer water pollution control fund back to the general fund. So a part of that 66% in operations now is $300,000 every year to return back to the general fund that the sewer fund had borrowed from for a number of years. Also, there are costs that, because this is now my voice, I apologize. Because this is an enterprise fund, all the costs associated with running the sewer system have to be contained within that. And there are a number of different costs that are out of the general fund, whether it's commitment from the DPW to help operate the plant, whether it's the finance department, town attorney's office, a number of different costs within the general fund are also getting ascribed to that fund as well. But most important, the biggest change really, is setting aside the money for the capital improvements that need to be made, which led us to this decision to do a user fee and go away from the ad valorem. So this year, the upcoming year, we propose to be either putting aside money for a number of large projects that we're going to be needing to do, as well as make improvements to either equipment or sewer lines in the upcoming year as well, to the tune of 2.1. And I wanted to show in 2014, the current year's budget, we have no money put aside for capital. And if you go back each year prior to this, you're going to see very little money being put aside for capital. Again, that was one of the council made, was to make the commitment to get the discipline, to put the money aside necessary to really run that facility and the lift stations and the lines that need to be made, so we don't get into a situation where we get a constant knock from DEEP telling us that we have a notice of violation. So it's a major commitment that we're making, but it's one that we really have very little choice to take. Another fund is our capital improvement fund, and list up there really quickly where the money comes from. This year we're proposing almost 2.1 million coming in from the general fund. We have local roads money that comes in from the state for capital improvements, and then we started, I think last year or 2 years ago, what we call the Police Outside Services Fund. And this is where our police officers work for private companies, and we charge a certain rate that we actually receive some money back on the use of the police cars. That then goes into this fund that we then push forward to the CIP to allow us to help pay for the replacement of those cruisers that need to be replaced. And you can see that the first thing we have up there under the expenditures are the police vehicle replacement. And typically we replace anywhere from 5 to 10 vehicles every year. And you can go down and see we have a number of different vehicle replacement, whether it's DPW light truck, DPW large truck. We have a number of vehicle replacements in there. Staff is currently working on a replacement plan that will hopefully be getting to the DPW subcommittee sometime later this year, and be ready for next year's budget to show what that commitment is that we should be making to replace all the vehicles that we have on a routine maintenance or a routine schedule. I think I'll go on to the next slide here real quick, because I want to talk a little bit about what this budget does. And we can break everything down into the dollars and cents, and that's exactly what council will be doing over the next month and a half, breaking it down to the dollars and cents. But I think it's important that we understand what we achieve by this budget. And first and foremost, this is a very large commitment towards a goal that I know since I've been here, and even prior to my arrival, council's had, and that's working on the revitalization of Thompsonville. And this budget puts towards that goal $750,000. Part of it is money for the Connecticut River Access Project and the planning and design stages of that. Some of it is money towards different programs to help get new home ownership or businesses into the area. and work towards development plans as well as put money towards revitalizing the area around the pond. That we feel is a major asset that unfortunately has not been utilized to its fullest extent. Talked earlier about the IT budget being reduced from the previous year. One of the goals that council laid out for me as part of last year's budget actually was to come back with a plan for the next 5 years for the IT department and looking to move us into the future with our IT. And this budget allows us to start making a major commitment towards the cloud, whether it's taking our Windows Office products, Microsoft Office products to the cloud, which will free up a lot of personnel time as well as commitment to servers, to getting fully integrated with the cloud with all of our storage, which saves a considerable amount of money going forward, as well as reduces staff commitments to those servers that we're going to have to replace at some point. It continues the replacement of the DPW vehicles that I talked about, begins the process of facility review to address the capital needs of all town facilities. Again, another goal that the town council has is understanding that a building like what we're in has a lot of capital needs. We have 29 facilities that are owned and maintained by the town of Enfield. They're getting up there in age. We have roof replacements. We have window replacements. We have a lot of capital needs. We want to do it in an organized fashion. The first step is to do a facility capital needs assessment, and this budget will allow us to start that process. Again, commits to the ongoing replacement of vehicles for the police department, and one of the things that, again, is a goal the council laid out is to start looking at our quality of life programs that we offer. And this program, with a very small amount, I think it's about 18,000 increase, allows us to actually expand our program offerings by just changing a couple positions around that make it easier for us to offer different programmings throughout the week, throughout the month, throughout the year. So we do this budget, the 119 million, by effectively raising the mill rate for the town of Enfield by 1/10. So we currently, as this graph shows, are at 29.26. This budget, if adopted, would go to 29.36. And it's always good to see where we came from. That's why I like this graph, and I'm just going to keep adding on to it. But you can see two major changes there in 2007 where it dipped dramatically. That was a reval year. And then when you go to 2013 where it goes up, that's a reval year as well. So there's kind of a decrease and an increase there. Really, the explanation is the revals that happen. And I think it's always important to take a look at how we stack up with other towns, either around us, which when you look at the towns below Enfield here are those towns that are generally surround the town of Enfield, where those that are above the town of Enfield are what are more comparable towns in terms of the services that we provide, size, and so on. And you can see that we're really, when all said and done, really in the middle of a lot of these, where it's probably not apples to apples to compare Enfield to a Suffield, an Ellington, a Summers, because of just the different types of services that we provide versus what they provide. But when you go up to the Meridans, the Windsors, the Manchesters, the East Hartfords, Middletowns, we're pretty comparable there. And again, we tend to be right in the middle to the lower half of what they have as mill rates. And it wouldn't be a presentation if I didn't talk about the general fund unassigned balance. And one of the unwritten goals that hopefully will get to be written sometime in the near future with council is trying to keep our undesignated fund balance in that 9 to 13% area. And with the end of this year, we would project that to be right here somewhere almost 11% of undesignated fund balance. And, people, to me, mistakenly call this a rainy day fund. And I guess to a certain degree it is, but when people start talking about rainy days, they have a different definition than what I have for a rainy day. And a rainy day to me is what happened with Storm Alfred. That was a rainy day, although it was, a foot of snow. Because we keep the balance that we keep in unassigned, we were able to weather that storm. We spent over $5 million in basically 2 months or less. And had we not had the undesignated or unassigned balance that we had, we never would have been able to do that the way that we were able to do it. Most of that money was returned back to the town from the federal government. But this is very important, not only from our ability to weather those storms, but also from the credit rating agencies that look, when we go out to look out for debt, to keep our rating where it's at. They look at this, some changes coming down the road in terms of the way that we fund the pension plans. There's a number of different things that they'll look at, but this is one of the larger areas that they look to make sure that a community has the wherewithal, should bad things happen, to be able to maintain their operations without defaulting on their responsibilities. For more information, go to our website. We've actually put up a new page for the budget that has a lot more information. We're putting everything that we do up there. And I want to thank you for your attention and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Matt. So now we'll go for the audience. If there's anyone that wishes to ask a question, make a comment, I ask that you raise your hand. We'll call on you and you can come forward. Anyone have a question or comment? Anybody? Jack and Liz, you're next.
Jack Sheridan, is that close enough? Jack Sheridan, 7 Buchanan Road. I was making some notes here, but the one thing that I wanted to ask was, you didn't show the effect of changing the water pollution control from the town to the user fee, and how that should have affected, in my opinion, the budget.
Can you start right away?
I don't know.
I can. Yeah. So the way that I kind of view this, and let's maybe go back here somehow, or maybe not. When we look at the mill rate, which is 29.26 currently, of that mill rate, 0.47 of that 29.26 is for, in the current year's budget, for the sewer. And what we did, I know that was very confusing, I understand, very confusing. What we did was say, okay, half a year cost this. We then need to generate tax revenue to equate to that half-year expense. And if we would have done a full year, the rate would have been 0.93. But because we did a half a year, it was only 0.47. So the effective difference between this year and next year in terms of that mill rate is really a 0.557, right? How it works out, or 0.57. Because what we did is we took that 0.47 that was there for the sewer and just kept it within that overall. So if we would have reduced that, we'd have lost the money necessary to fund this year's budget. So it was about a 0.57 increase overall from what was funding the general fund last year. That explain it?
No. I don't get it. I thought you were going to show, in other words, if you have an increase this year, it would be different if you weren't projecting an increase.
Right.
But you're projecting an increase,
Yep.
so shouldn't there be some balance to show why we didn't affect the savings from that going from the ad valorem to the use fee?
Well, so the sewer side of it is not receiving any any money from the tax side now.
Okay,
So,
okay, so that, okay,
so
Gotcha.
that effectively, again, that .47 that's in this year's budget, which went to the sewer, is now fully going just to the general fund.
okay.
So that's why when I look at it, I look at the general fund increase being a .57 mill increase, not a .1, but
Okay.
the effective mill rate is a .1 increase.
All right, thank you. I got you now. The other, the other thing I noticed on here was, one of the things on capital improvement program, you have 176,377 for facility needs assessment. What is that?
As I said, one of council's goals is to look at the 29 facilities that we own and maintain to figure out exactly what are the capital needs for those buildings. So again, the roof, the windows, HVAC, boiler systems, all those things we need to review and make a determination, what is the life expectancy of those things and when they need to be replaced. Quite frankly, it's getting ready for probably a request for a referendum. To fund
Well,
that.
yeah, but that doesn't explain this fee, this dollar fee. Are you hiring somebody?
Yeah, that would be going
Oh.
out, doing an RFQ for a consulting firm to come in and actually do the review of all of our facilities.
Oh, okay. That's what I was wondering, whether that was going to be done in-house or,
We, we've done some elements of it in-house. We just felt that it would be better to get some professionals that, deal with structural and roofing and not actually be a part of the people that might be coming in and doing the bid for that work. So we want an independent contractor to come in and take a look at that for us.
okay, thank you. The other thing is you had down, between the light and heavy trucks, $460,000. Is that something we already spent, or are you intending to spend the same amount next year?
Well, that shows what we are proposing for next year. So I think there was 260 for a heavy-duty truck,
Right.
and then 200 for a number of light-duty. Just to save space, I didn't break down each of the different trucks, but I believe there's like there's 5 or 6 different trucks, light-duty, so pickups and smaller trucks that DPW uses.
But my question is, what did we spend? Didn't we just buy it? I'm understanding we just bought a bunch.
Yeah, we spent $1.3 million on vehicles in the current year.
And we're going to continue to spend.
Yeah, unfortunately, that $1.3 million only made a scratch into the capital needs of the DPW trucks. And again, I think they actually had called in their plan for 2 large trucks in the upcoming budget, but I reduced it down to 1.
Okay, thank you. Is it okay at this forum to ask about something on the school side of the budget?
Actually, yes, it is, and we have at least 2 board members in attendance, and I prepped at least one that he may be called upon. So,
One of the questions I had is when the school board presented their budget a week ago Monday, they talked about Common Core and what it was costing in advance of Common Core, and that they wanted to get out in front of that, and it was a lot of money. I don't remember exactly what that was, but it was a lot of money, and they suggested hiring all these people to do the evaluations. Well, Common Core isn't official yet. It hasn't been mandated that we use it. And if they put Common Core into the budget, I'm afraid that if it looks like there's a lot of states that are pulling out of Common Core and it's being rejected. So once it's in there, and the fact that we have a minimum required distribution or minimum required budget, are we going to then continue to have to fund that, even if it's pulled from the schools to have to do it?
So you all can see me. Your first question was Common Core. The Connecticut Department of Higher Education, or Department of Education, adopted Common Core standards in 2010. We are in 2014. It had nothing to do with the Connecticut General Assembly. It was, again, regulations passed by the Connecticut Department of Education. So unless the Connecticut Department of Education changes its regulations or the General Assembly forces them to change regulations, that's what we have to live with. In terms of hiring people, part of this process is curriculum. And money has been invested the past couple of years on curriculum already. And I've seen some of the curriculum in the elementary schools. This material was purchased by the curriculum director based upon evaluations with state regulators. We do not have in the budget proposed any new people to implement this process beyond what we currently have. Did I answer your question?
No. It says in everything I've been reading in the paper, says, first of all, you do have a considerable amount of money attributed to the budget to support Common Core. And
Current people.
right. Well, I didn't say you were adding people this year. I'm just saying the dollars are there. What I'm concerned about is the budget. If you put the dollars there and then Common Core is not mandated, because there's 27 states are opting out of it. And there's more and more people, the parents are opting out because they don't want their kids to be tested under the Common Core rules. So there's more and more parents opting out, which they have the right to do. And so if we're getting out in front of this thing financially, my concern is, as it's always been, once you give them the money, you can't take it away. So in future years, we'll have to fund something that isn't there.
The curriculum, money hasn't been invested in curriculum already for the process to implement Common Core. It's happening at the elementary levels primarily right now. There would be there are monies in here to continue that process. What we've requested of the Department of Education, the commissioner, the governor, is to slow down this process so we can kind of see where we are and not necessarily have to invest more money in what I call curriculum. We have individuals on staff that were hired a year and a half ago. It's in the current budget. And they are all working collectively, 3 people, to ensure the implementation or assimilation of the curriculum into the school system.
Yeah.
But there are not any additional staff proposed in what the request was to the council.
Well, based on the fact that last year you hired 2 new curriculum directors and it was supposed to be to support Common Core, my only suggestion is stop funding it, and we should continue to level fund, as the town manager said, because I don't think with the money that we gave last year for the school budget and supposedly to support all-day kindergarten when it was already funded and they had the money for it. And then on this budget, there were several line items that were discussed. One of them was the substitute teachers, and they show here on the budget that it's $391,000, when actually it's about $750,000. So I'm wondering why that number is so askew from what the actual number is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. But if we'll be glad to follow up if you have any questions. We can do further research for you.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Liz?
Elizabeth Davis, I reside at 201 North Maple Street. One of my questions is, and I didn't see it on there, from our bonds and loans, what actually is the interest that we are paying each year? Like the total amount that we have to pay in interest? All right.
So, the proposed year, we are going to be, in principal, paying 2.8 million, almost 2.9, and the interest on that is $843,000.
So a third is interest. That's what you're saying. 2.8
2.9.
million.
Plus the 8.
Yeah, the interest is 800, actually.
843,000 is the interest, and
843,888 is the interest payment that we'll be making, proposed for next year. The principal reduction is 2.8 million.
it's almost $1 million a year just in interest. Okay, well, thank you for answering that. So can I ask the Board of Ed question too, since I'm...
Sure. Yeah, go ahead. And maybe Ray will take this one.
Right, Ray. Yes. So since we're not hiring, as everybody wants to say, more people, what are we doing about getting some help for the principals with these evaluations? Since I'm already watching half our administration be at school 6 to 8 o'clock at night. I mean, they have no quality of life at all.
You hit my hot button, Liz.
I know. I always do.
Is that a softball? Right now, we're trying to figure that out. There's negotiations going on that I'm not privy to, and there's other work in the works to help our beleaguered principals out. As far as evaluations go, we're rolling the dice, hoping that Governor Malloy keeps his promise to delay the evaluation part of Common Core. We're still going through with evaluations, and that's a work in process. So right now, we understand that our principals are getting creamed. I visited a few, finally got out of being ill and went out and visited some elementary schools last week. And if you look at the principals, you can tell when somebody's kind of overworked by looking at their face. And their eyes, they could pack up for a trip to Bermuda if they had the time. So they're getting killed by, or getting hit on by social issues, behavioral issues, trying to manage staff, trying to keep things calm within the building, and they're doing a terrific job. The fact of the matter is we have a hard budget, and as we told Dr. Schumann, if we get the budget in line and you have funding to hire principals, go ahead. Now, people are going to sit there and say, but we have declining enrollment. And we do. But you take 200 students this year, spread it over 5,200 or 5,100, and you spread it over all the classrooms, it's not enough to cut staff, or to reduce staff, rather. So we're trying. We don't have an answer for you yet, Liz. We don't have an answer for the principals. But the BOE people, all the members, are going out to their schools, and we're listening to people and trying to figure out a way around this to give them a better quality of life. The things that I saw last week were just ridiculous. Were eye-opening. So, does that answer your question? I mean, it's a work in process.
Well, it does, so I don't have it's partly answered, but I do appreciate you're out at the schools, and all of you guys are. But, I am hoping that it's resolved. So while you're standing there, I do have another question. Since you're up anyways, right?
I owe you one, Scott.
What are we doing about counselors and psychiatrists in the elementaries and stuff?
When we
for
got
full-time?
we're working on that one too. What we're doing is we got the budget. There was $165,000 allocated for social workers, counselors for the elementary schools. That was reduced. It was reduced with the thought to go and see if we can do a shared services concept with the town. Because if these children have issues during the school year, they're going to have issues in the summer too, and off times too. And we want to make sure that we have services available to them as well during those times. So we're trying to do some sort of a cost sharing, cost savings type of thing with the town. However, so far, we haven't gotten past the certification issues. And we're working with Dr. Schumann's staff to get those questions answered so we can then help out. Again, that's another reason why our principals are literally getting hit up every day with an issue. And a big part of their day is dealing with those types of things. And the family issues that come into school are phenomenal. I'm old school, as you know, and some of the stuff I'm hearing and going, huh? Are you serious? I mean, it's really a serious problem with our schools that is affecting our ability to deliver a quality education and a very good, positive educational experience. So those are two things we're working on. What's your third question, Liz?
That's it. You want me to keep going? I'm sure I can dig up more, but that was my main one, so thank you, Ray.
You're welcome.
And hey, Matt, can you just go a little more in depth on Liz's first point of the difference between interest and principal, and why that 2.9 million in principal payment down would also be accompanied by an $843,000 interest payment? I know that we've got debt that goes out over 20-year bonds.
Typically we do 20-year bonds. And right now, in that, we're still paying down, I believe, the early roads 2000, I think roads 2000, 2005 bonds, the elementary school improvements were made. Those are all going to be, that's what's going to be coming off in 2017, which will then lower our principal and interest. But typically what happens in the first part of the 20 years is you have high interest, low principal. And then in the latter half of the retirement, you see large principal, low interest. That's just typically how they do it, because the people want their money up front. They're loaning it to us. So,
Microphone.
I don't know. I interpreted this question as to what is our bonding interest rate? And I thought it was somewhere around between 3 and 4%, but I'm not sure.
that I don't have off the top of my head. You know, I don't have that off the top of my head, but we can get that easy enough. But we're being told it's 3 or 4%.
Okay. You're going to have to play Vanna with the microphone, and Bill's got a question, and maybe Tom. Okay.
Matt, my question was, or is, how much debt load do we carry, relatively speaking, and is it less in the coming year than it has in the last few years?
I'm not sure what our current debt ratio is, but it's typically very low. I think we can go up to somewhere around $640 million worth of debt. We're nowhere close to that. So off the top of my head, again, I don't know what that number is, but we can easily get that and put an answer out as part of this.
And it actually, I think it was yesterday, Enfield Patch came out with a great article. It was either yesterday, they're still around, and it gave the amount of debt per capita and ranked every town within the state of Connecticut as to where that town stood in relation to everyone else. And so there would be like a little push pin or bubble, and it was colored based on the highest percentage to the lowest. And Enfield fell pretty low in comparison to the 169 towns. So I was going to try to pull it up on my iPad, but I no longer have the patch link when we changed over the iPads. So if you get it, go back. It's either yesterday or the day before, and it was a great article. So meant to link it to Facebook, but I never got a chance to. So. Okay, all set here. Next, come on up.
Bethany Ola, 24 Betty Road. I love the outside-the-box thinking with the Board of Ed and the town, trying to collaborate on IT and social services with the counselors. Where would that fall into place if that could work with the social services and counselors? What part of the social service budget would that fall into? Would it be youth services?
Most likely, that's where most of our counseling is contained right now. Again, a lot of things to work through in terms of how that would be done, but most likely.
Okay, because right now the Board of Ed has cut their counselors, and you have proposed a cut in youth services. So how do we get that to work, considering these behavioral issues, which I'm glad they're seeing. I wish they would see them earlier in the year before they start talking about budget. But these issues snowball as these kids get older in our school systems. And you add puberty in there, come junior high, and you get bigger problems. And I see some of our most involved parents who care about our schools, care about our town, pulling their children into magnet schools at that point because of that exact issue. And that's what they've told me. And I believe in the public school system, and I know what a drain the magnet school tuition is on our Board of Ed budget. And so we just create more expenses by not addressing something early enough.
Point of clarification, the reduction that you see in the youth services because of less grant funding, so it doesn't have any operational impact on youth services. It just means we didn't get a grant yet, or don't have a grant yet for the upcoming year. So there's not really any reduction in youth services.
So if you have less funds, what does it get funded by?
Well, again, off the top of my head, I'm not sure exactly which grants weren't going to be funded next year. But for instance, a good example would be the substance abuse. I think that may be the one that isn't getting funded. That doesn't fund personnel. That usually funds either seminars, advertising, promotional activities like that. So those items that were part of that grant would not be funded in the upcoming year. But again, that's something that we might get, we might not get a grant for that. Did you want to say something, Pam? You have to stand up.
I just wanted to say that Youth Services received a federal grant that is doing the same work, and so we were fortunate to have an overlap, but we have a 5-year federal grant that is doing prevention work around substance abuse, and we have an opportunity to apply for it for another 5 years. So that work in terms of prevention around substance abuse will be able to continue. So it was the state grant that ended.
To answer your other question is, we haven't put we suggested this, or some people here on the council suggested putting the two together. We haven't come up with a committee yet, but we're working on that, the board and the council.
Now, what is the timeline for something like that? I heard certifications running into some issues with that. It doesn't seem like that is a 1-year kind of process. Does anyone have an estimated timeline that would actually take to work out?
And only speaking from experience from when we did the buildings and grounds, custodial and IT mergers, it takes about a year to have a joint committee between the board and the council sit down, put the proposal together, iron out how it's going to operate, develop the service level agreements that are needed, because you've got one agency providing a service to another for funding. And so I would say it's probably a year. Probably could impact the next budget. It's not to say we can't do it faster, but I think you were at the budget meeting with the board last week. Okay, so the subject came up there, and it was, okay, guys, great idea, because it was a great idea. Tom Arnone proposed it a couple weeks ago in an email to the council, provided a lot of detailed information. Now we have to put the words into action. We got nods of heads from the Board of Education members that were at the meeting as well. Typically it's a resolution on the board side, the council side, form the joint committee, have them sit down, do the work, make a proposal which then needs to be adopted by both boards and then funded. Realistically, things like that have tended to take a year to get into the next budget cycle. Who's next? Tom? Mr. Picture Enfield.
I didn't bring my camera with me today.
I took
Tom-
care of that already. It's up on Facebook. Yeah.
I saw that. Tom Kinsler, 359 Washington Road. Just two quick things. There might be some confusion on the debt service that was reduced and the interest that was paid, that 800 and some odd thousand compared to the 2.9 million. The 2.9 million, if I understand you correctly, is the reduction of our debt service. The total debt service would be some much larger number, 80, 100 million, whatever the number is.
Yeah. And again, off the top of my head, I don't know exactly what the outstanding debt is in total. And so every year, just, think of it in terms of a mortgage payment. Two components or three components of mortgage payment, escrow, the interest, and then the principal. And so the 2.9 is the principal on all the notes. So I'm not even sure how many bonds we have outstanding right now, the number of bonds. And so the principal on that's at 2.9.
2.9 that we paid last year, and
Well, we will be paying next year.
next year. So that's the reason I brought it up, because so the public doesn't think that we paid $843,000 on a loan for 2.9.
Oh, no, yeah.
We
this
paid
is a greater
$843,000,
number, yes.
and at the same time, we dropped our debt for this coming year.
Right.
We will drop our debt by 2.9 in principal.
Yep, correct.
Second thing, on the sewers, I know Jack, I don't know if the way he asked the question, but there's some folks that want maybe a little bit more clarity on how we used to do it, where we would take $3 million to fund the WPC, and now that has been moved over, and it needed to a user fee. There's people that don't understand why the budget hasn't dropped by $3 million. So if you could just spend a moment and kind of talk about, I know some of the things I saw in there and cost increases and all that type of thing.
Yeah, well, again, when you look at the raw number, to be able to fund the budget that I proposed, we needed that 0.57 mil increase in the general fund to allow us to do that. So that's, I guess, the raw piece of it. What that takes into account are the increases, the commitments that we're making to the Thompsonville, additional money for the schools. All those things are components of that 0.57 mil increase.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Questions, comments? Anyone else? Bob?
Bob T. Katz, 5 Enfield Terrace. I'm going to talk about teacher evaluations and the numbers. We had a meeting in December, and I asked the board member for actual real numbers of school enrollments, the building capacity, the number of classrooms. I haven't seen that yet, but that facility analysis will probably do that. And many of the classrooms, they converted to storage rooms or offices, so they're still really classrooms, and they're not being used as classrooms. The bottom line is the Connecticut River Valley is losing population. The projections for 2015, 2020, and 2025, Enfield will be down to 40,000 population from 45,000, and that still includes 3,000 in the prisons. So we're really effectively 37,000. The peak enrollment was in 1971, close to 14,000. Last year in the schools, I understand, and this number hasn't been confirmed, is 5,191. Superintendent is developing his budget for 52 or 5,300 students, which you're not going to have. It's probably going to be less than the 5,100. 2010 numbers show that the births and deaths are actually equal in Enfield. And the future projection says that deaths are going to exceed the births. Enrollment by the last demographer said it would be 4,500 students in the school system, and probably it's going to be 4,000. So we haven't taken any steps to downsize, eliminate some of our buildings.
downsized the school budget. We seem to be increasing and moving in an increased direction. The population is declining. Secondly, evaluations. It's my understanding from a board member that evaluations have been going on for the last 20 or 30 years, self-evaluations. So I don't see where anything is new about evaluations. It's been being done. Self-evaluations is done in the high-tech industries. It works very well. They don't need additional managers or people in the industry to do that. But it's strange that the school systems need all this extra help to do self-evaluations. It's been done. It'll be done in the future. In the industry, if you're not working out, you're told to move on. In the school system, you're protected by the union. You don't move on. We're failing half our students. You look at the test scores, 50%, 55%. What about the rest of the students that aren't making the grade? Why don't have a program to take care of those students? Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Would any of our board guests like to respond to Mr. Tikaz? Mr. Wauer is going to take it this time.
Thank you. Which question would you like me to respond to first?
All of them.
In the budget, proposed budget, there from the superintendent's office, it lists the number of staff in each of the buildings, and I'll just point out that several years ago, previous boards of ed, previous councils came up with a plan to restructure the elementaries, and went from 9 buildings down to 7 buildings, and that process is working very well. Okay. In terms of facility evaluation, again, we've gone from 9 to 7. We have a public forum committee that's in place right now called the Fermi Reuse Committee. It will be making its report back to the Board of Ed hopefully no later than June 30th, at which time recommendation will be made and the board will have a vote. So that particular structure, that issue is being addressed right now, and we'll make a decision on in a few months. There's a Stowe School building currently still operated by the Board of Education, leased to CREC, and that is coming off, well, I'm not sure. It's coming off CREC's line eventually, and the Board of Ed will have to make another decision on that building, whether or not it wants to retain it as an educational facility. So there are two facilities that are currently in operation that we're going to be addressing. As far as, that's the facility question, I believe. Okay, so your other question related to enrollment. Yes, enrollment continues to decline. Every October 30th, there's a number given based on the students in the school. It's a report given to the state of Connecticut, Department of Education. And I believe our number currently is, I think it's 5,100 and change. It's projected by, and I've read this from staff of the Board of Education, projected next October 30th to be 200 less. But structurally, the way we have our buildings, we don't know where that 200 is going to come from. It could be fewer kindergarten enrollees. It could be transfers out. So until October 30th of 2014, we won't know which classrooms it's affecting or which buildings. But that's the projection and that is the trend, and we understand that. But because we now have 4 K through 2s and 3 through 5s, we can modify classroom size in that structure. But again, we don't know until next October 30th where that 200 reduction is going to be. So it's premature to look at further modifications in use of buildings vis-a-vis that 200 reduction that's projected.
Thank you, Dave. Anyone next? Questions? Jack?
Jack Sheridan, 7 Buchanan Road. Before I talked about the $750,000 that was put for substitute teachers, and no one's addressed that. The Board of Ed voted to approve a $391,146 on that line item. What I noticed was that the actual number in 2013 was $665,380. So when they know that they said when they presented it to the council that it was going to be 750, I'd like to know why they're doing that, number one, where the money's going to come from to go over the 391. And one of the reasons we were told at that meeting was that because we know that there are a lot more teachers than being used administratively, because we know we have classrooms with 25 kids in it, and we know that the ratio was down to 7.5 or 8 to 1 students per teacher. So why are we have so many administrative teachers that we can't use in place of substitutes? Now, we were told the other night, well, they're not necessarily have the credentials for that particular teaching subject. Well, neither do the substitutes. So why are we hiring so many substitutes to take the place of all these teachers that are on hand? And I know they're being used administratively because, like I said, we know that we have classrooms with 25 kids in them. So I just think that somebody needs to explain how that happens and why we continue to keep hiring so many substitute teachers.
So this has turned into the Board of Education budget community conversations. Want to join us at the table? No.
Yeah, and I don't have all the answers on the substitute budget tonight. We can ask the superintendent. What we do know is that the Board of Education contracted with Kelly Services, and in that process has reduced the cost to the town in that line item slightly. They're managing the system now, we're not. So that could be one of the differences that you see. But we can get more information from the superintendent on that.
I'm not here to put you on the spot. I just want to know from a taxpayer's point of view why we have so many substitute teachers, and I don't care where you get them from. If the fact is, we'll go back to the numbers that I did a few years ago where in high school, 20% of the time, the high school students were being taught by substitute teachers. 20% of the time, based on who they were hiring as substitutes. So if I were concerned about the marks and what the grades were doing in the high school classes, I would look at why we have so many substitutes. Thank you.
I'll talk with the superintendent or the deputy superintendent tomorrow to get something in writing. We'll post it up on the website.
Thank you, Jack. Anyone else? Any questions, comments? Liz? Yes, please. We need to be official.
All right. Elizabeth Davis, I reside at 201 North Maple Street. This is back at the Board of Ed. Sorry. I just wanted to clarify with and I know, right, you and I have talked a real lot in a sense about the teacher evaluations. And from when I started school, kindergarten, we had an A that danced around, and you learned A is ah. The kids in kindergarten don't learn that now. They're expected to read. There's a lot more involved. So that covers the bit that you need good teachers, extra staff, But the teacher evaluations, to cover why they do need help, and I get to see it firsthand, is when they're doing the evaluation, it's different than doing a regular teacher evaluation. They're sitting there analyzing the teacher, writing a complete report out, and then when they start inputting it, it's within a certain amount of time frame. Once you started that report in the computer, it has to link to each category of what you evaluate a teacher, and has to 100% link. And you have a deadline to make. So now, I watch my wife at night sit there to 10 o'clock at night because you have a deadline to make. Yes, not administration in this town. And she's not even a principal, but they brought directors in another town to assist the principals because the principals cannot do it alone. It's impossible. So for people to think we've always evaluated our teachers, yes, but not to the extent that it needs to be done now. It's no joke what these principals and our administrations in our town has to go to do an evaluation. And then to bring in subs, well, you have teachers that do get sick. Everybody's entitled to leave or personal days. And you do have teachers that do get pregnant and they can't be at school. You have PPEs, you have EIPs. You have a lot of reasons why we do need subs. Everybody needs to have somebody fill in for them, just like all of us at our job. We're not there every single day. You know, we have people that have to cover down. So wasn't really a question, but I did want to clarify that teacher evaluation is totally different than what it used to be. And they do need help. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Liz. Questions, comments? Anyone else? Ray?
To further give you some more feedback, Liz, I sat with a number of teachers over the past few days, and they're being asked to do more than just teach. They're struggling to keep in their classroom. That's what they're doing. Some of the stuff that they're being asked to do is data entry. They're pulled out of the classrooms quite a bit, and you have to keep your classroom covered. Now, the other issues around evaluations are, I've been around a long time, and I've gone through evaluations, self-evaluations, and in business it's different. My CEO really doesn't care about me. He cares about my work, but I don't even get up to the vice president. So what's happening here is we're now being asked to have our teachers evaluated against a new set of standards called Common Core. And people got to be trained. The state is also mandating that you cannot, or regulating that you cannot have anyone less than a certified, and the magic number is 092 certification to do that. So that's what we start to get caught in a rock and a hard place on our teacher evaluations. Now, a gentleman named Dr. Fisher, who's a superintendent in the New London Schools District at the state capitol, when I was down there listening and testifying, he made a comment, and this I think really hit home. We're pounding on our teachers. We want to hold our teachers accountable, and we should. However, we're not holding our students accountable. Parents aren't accountable, which leads to the issues that you have, and I'm just laying it out for you, that when the principal, he or she is inundated with social issues, behavioral issues, staff issues, and it's an ugly thing that we're still going to work through. And it's going to take time to get a solution. There's no instant coffee type of thing. Add water, get instant coffee. It's going to take some work. It's going to take some listening. It's going to take an awful lot of out-of-the-box thinking, especially if the state does make us perform Common Core evaluations. That rainy day fund that you showed up, we might be hitting you up there for about $700 grand. So put a reservation in for us, will you? Thanks.
Can you deliver the microphone to Councilman Arnone?
Just to jump back on what we talked about earlier with the per capita debt service, out of 169 municipalities, and 169 ranking the very lowest per capita debt, and number one being the highest, we rank 145. So we're very far down the list. It's actually surprised me it was that far. It's, Matt, great job there.
We've always been known as one of the pay-as-you-go communities. So, questions, comments, anyone else? Last chance? All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming out this evening, giving us your thoughts and ideas and suggestions. And please stay engaged throughout the process. And we have our public hearing on April 30th. April 30th at Enfield High School? Enfield High School, 7 p.m., April 30th. Thank you all. Is there a motion to adjourn by Deputy Mayor Lee, seconded by Councilman Mangini? All those in favor? Those opposed? We are adjourned. Have a good evening.